Eric Wilson couldn't hear or speak. He was both deaf and mute, which always made him unwanted attention's favorite target. Whether it was in a good way or bad, people always noticed him, like he was something more than just a normal human. Some sympathized with him, some bullied him, some treated him too well, just because he was deaf and mute, which honestly hurt him more. But, of course, he could never let it out. Eric wasn't always like this. An accident at the age of 17 changed everything. He had always struggled with hearing problems and stuttering, but after the accident, it worsened. In just a year, he went completely deaf and mute. He only had his mother by his side. His father, he had abandoned them long ago. A drunk, an abuser, a monster. He had spent years watching his mother suffer at his father's hands. Years listening to his own name being cursed out in slurred anger. But not anymore. His father was gone. And Eric, he wanted to be something big. He wanted to earn money, take care of his mother, and escape everything. So, he buried himself in studies and part-time jobs, saving up for a hearing aid. Being mute helped in a way. No one expected him to talk. But being deaf, that was a nightmare in class. Most people ignored him. Some admired him because he was a top student. But one person stood out among them all. Michael Weeks. The name alone sent shivers through the campus. A man standing at 6'4", with deep, emotionless eyes, sharp features, and a cold nature. The wildest person on campus. A heartthrob with an insane fan following. And terrifying as hell. His glare alone was enough to make people feel like they were burning. People liked him, feared him, but Michael ignored him. Unlike others, he never gave Eric a single glance, a single word, a single nod. But Eric wasn't dumb. He saw how Michael's expression shifted whenever their eyes met. How his body tensed, his eyes darkened, and emotions thickened in the air. He didn't know what it meant. But he knew one thing. Michael hated him so much that he beat up anyone who tried to talk to Eric. And that was why Michael was always in fights. It was late night. The library had closed. Eric walked alone, books hugged tightly to his chest. Then he saw him, Michael Weeks, beating a guy to a pulp. Nothing new for him. The man lay on the ground, groaning in pain, while Michael stood above him, his face blank, his hands dusting off invisible dirt. Then, he turned, only for his deep-shaded, dark eyes locked onto Eric. The stare was long, intense, unreadable. Then, Michael finally spoke, his voice crispy, breathy and low, though Eric Koydianar hear it, he could feel it. "Fuck, even looking at you is complicated." That was all he said before walking away. Eric didn't hear it, but he could read the way his lips moved. And it hurt. What did he ever do to Michael for him to hate him so much? Eric felt pain, but then he made up his mind to never even appear before Michael's eyes. Ignoring the incident and his words, Eric went to sleep. But the next day, he woke up feeling strange. Weird. Off. Different. Then he heard it. He heard something. He really did hear something. Eric shot up in bed, heart hammering. He was deaf. He couldn't hear things. This was a dream. Right. Shaking his head, he climbed down from his top bunk bed and reached for his towel. That's when his eyes accidentally met his dorm mates, a guy brushing his teeth, half asleep, not even realizing Eric was looking at him. And then, Eric heard it. Damn, the dream was so awesome. I was fighting, landing kills like a top pro. So freaking cool. If only I could do that in real life and show these kids who's boss. Eric's entire body froze. What the hell? His dorm mate hadn't even moved his lips. He wasn't speaking. And yet, Eric heard him. His head spun. This isn't true. This can't happen. I'm deaf. I can't hear. He turned too fast and stumbled into another dorm mate. Their eyes met. And then, dude, can't you see before you walk? Useless to say it anyway. He can't hear or apologize. Eric's hands shook. His dorm mate didn't even move his mouth. Then how? How was Eric hearing this? This is mind reading. Is this what they call mind reading? From that moment, everything changed. Whoever locked eyes with Eric, he could hear every single one of their thoughts. Someone panicking over an exam. Someone thinking about food. Someone daydreaming about their favorite show. Someone thinking about their crush. Someone hoping for class suspension. It was too much. His head ached. His mind spun. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later that evening. Eric was trying to keep his mind in balance until, as usual, he found Michael in a fight. Again, he wanted to walk away. But then, Michael's eyes snapped to his. And Eric heard it. Loud, clear, dangerous. "Ah, there you are, my darling, how many times do I have to warn you not to show me that beautiful face when I'm like this? It's already hard enough to control myself around you, and now you come looking all innocent while I'm covered in blood." Eric's mind raced. "What? You look so stunned, Tisk, I hope you're not too scared. But what choice do I have? These pathetic fools keep testing my patience, daring to breathe in your direction. How could I possibly let them go when they thought they could mess with what's mine?" Eric's soul left his body. His legs froze. His hands went cold. His brain shut down. Michael. Michael was thinking about him. Not just thinking. Obsessing. In the most unexpected way possible. What the fuck? Eric was so dead. Eric was terrified. Scared. Confused. Dumbfounded. His mind was blank, his body running on autopilot as he made his way to class, desperately pretending he hadn't just heard Michael's thoughts. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Michael hated him, right. Right. Shoving his panic down, Eric quietly walked into his classroom, heading straight for his usual spot, the window seat in the last row. It was always empty. Always his. Somehow, no one ever took it. And he liked it that way. The cool breeze, the way the sunlight streamed in, it was the only peaceful thing in his life. With a shaky breath, he dropped into the chair, gripping his books like a lifeline. It was fine. He'd act normal. He hadn't heard anything. Michael Weeks was not secretly insane. Right. But then, his mistake, he glanced up. And locked eyes with Michael again. Eric immediately froze. Michael's face. Completely unreadable. Michael's mind. My darling really seems to like that window seat a lot. Eric's heart stopped. But that guy earlier tried to sit there, so I had to give him a lesson. Not my fault. Eric's blood ran cold. He likes that seat too much. Should I buy that spot? Eric nearly choked on air. No, that's too much. He can already sit there. If anyone tries to disrupt that, of course, I'm here. Eric's eyes widened in horror. That's why Michael had beaten up that guy earlier. Just because he wanted to sit here. Was this a joke? Was this really happening? Eric gripped the edge of his desk, his nails digging into the wood. This was not okay. Not normal. Definitely not normal. Not something he could just ignore. Michael didn't hate him. Michael was obsessed with him. Like what the hell? How? When and how did this happen? Wasn't he supposed to hate Eric the most? Eric was so overwhelmed, so numb from everything happening that he completely forgot to pay attention to class. He was staring at his desk, lost in his thoughts, when he suddenly realized. The teacher was already teaching. And he hadn't written a single note. Shit. Eric cursed in his mind, gripping his pen in frustration. The stress, the confusion, the sheer insanity of what he had discovered about Michael, everything was too much. His knuckles turned white as he squeezed his pen too hard. Crack. The pen snapped in half. Eric exhaled sharply, feeling the broken plastic dig into his palm. He was screwed. Just then, a classmate sitting ahead of him turned around and tapped his desk. "Hey, Eric, have you done the notes?" Eric blinked. Then, quickly shook his head. The classmate gave a small nod before smiling. "Oh, no problem. You helped me last time, so let me help you this time. Here, write it from here. You can give it back anytime." Eric's entire mood lifted as he smiled widely, nodding in gratitude. But, the moment he locked eyes with the classmate, he heard it. "I don't mind helping Eric. He's helped me a lot before, but why the hell did Michael have to threaten me to do it? It's not like I wasn't willing anyway. Also, since when does he even care if Eric is able to take notes or not? What the hell is going on between them?" Eric's smile froze. His fingers tightened on the notebook as his heartbeat picked up. Michael threatened him to give Eric notes. Why? Eric blinked, feeling shock creep into his mind as he hesitantly turned to the other side of the classroom. Only to lock eyes with Michael. His cold, sharp, deadly eyes. Eric's stomach dropped. And then, Michael's thoughts slammed into him like a truck. Damn this bastard, I told him to share the notes, not go all smiley and sweet with my Eric darling. What if my darling starts liking him? Eric's breath hitched. Damn it, but I can't even help him myself, he thinks I hate him. If I suddenly act nice, he'll freak out. And he's scared of me too, great. Fuck me. Why do I have such a shitty nature? Eric swallowed, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at Michael, mind spinning. Michael was jealous. Michael was possessive. Michael cared. A lot. Too much. Before Eric could even process anything, Michael suddenly stiffened. What the fuck? Why is my darling staring at me? Did I do something wrong? Michael's body jerked slightly as he blinked at Eric, his cold expression cracking for the first time, because of pure confusion. Eric's heart was pounding. He quickly snapped his eyes back down to the notebook, gripping his pen as if it could keep him grounded. This was too much. Michael was too much. Eric was terrified. He didn't know what to do or think. His body felt like it had gone numb, his mind a chaotic mess. But what scared him more than anything was the sudden, strange warmth blooming in his chest. His heart was fluttering, not in fear, not in anxiety, but in something else. Something warm, something foreign, something that made his fingers twitch, his breath feel a little too shallow, his body feel a little too warm. What the hell was this? Eric quickly shook his head, trying to force the feeling away. He was just overwhelmed. That's all. It was too much information at once. Michael was obsessed with him. Michael was jealous over something so stupid. Michael was possessive in a way that was borderline psychotic. And yet, his heart fluttered. His throat felt tight. Eric swallowed hard, gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles turned white. He'd spent his entire life invisible. People either pitied him, ignored him, or bullied him. But this was different. Michael wasn't just noticing him. Michael was noticing everything. His favorite seat, his notes, the way he smiled at his classmate. Michael wasn't just aware of his existence. Michael was watching his every move. To an extreme. Eric pressed his lips together, glancing at Michael again. Michael was still staring at him. His usually emotionless face was slightly furrowed, like he was genuinely confused by Eric's reaction. His thoughts were loud, raw, unfiltered. Shit, did I scare him again? Fuck, he looks pale. Did I push too far? I need to be more careful. But what if he finds out? What if he knows how much I? Michael suddenly stopped thinking, like he just shut down. His cold eyes flickered. Eric's heart skipped a beat. Did he just realize something? Eric quickly looked away, feeling his entire body heat up. This was insane. Michael Weeks was insane. And maybe, just maybe, Eric was starting to feel something even crazier. That day, Eric spent the entire evening at the library, burying himself in books. He needed a distraction. Something, anything, to get his mind off things. Michael's insane possessiveness. Michael's obsessive thoughts. And worst of all, the strange warmth Eric had felt earlier. But no matter how much he tried to focus, the words on the pages blurred together. Michael's thoughts kept echoing in his mind. Should I buy that window seat? What if he starts liking that guy? Shit, did I scare him again? Eric groaned, shutting the book with a thud. This was too much. He needed a cold shower. By the time he returned to the dorm, the place was mostly empty. His roommates were out at a gaming cafe, leaving just him and Michael. Michael was lounging at his desk, scrolling lazily through his phone. He didn't even look up. But Eric noticed. For the first time, he noticed something small. Michael's eyeballs flicking, the way he quickly sneaked a glance before going back to his screen. Eric's breath hitched. Wow, how had he never noticed this before? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. Right now, he needed to clear his mind. A cold shower was the best way to do that. Eric grabbed his towel and went to the bathroom, only to stop short. His body wash was finished. Great. Just great. Eric was extremely particular about hygiene. There was no way he could shower without it. He sighed, rubbing his temple before glancing toward Michael. Should he ask? Michael was still looking at his phone, legs lazily stretched under the desk. Eric hesitated, took a deep breath, and slowly approached. The moment he was close enough, Michael's eyes flicked up. For a split second, his gaze softened. Just a tiny bit. Then, almost immediately, he masked it. What? His voice was its usual cold, lazy drawl. Eric hesitated, then slowly grabbed a sticky note from the table. He quickly scribbled, "My body wash is finished. Do you have extra? Can you please share?" He placed the note on the desk. Michael glanced at it, then let out a short chuckle. Not the usual mocking one, but the billionaire type one. The, you must be joking, kind. Eric braced himself for rejection. You think I'll share something with someone like you? Never. Michael smirked. But then, he stood up, towering over Eric effortlessly. Eric blinked, feeling small despite being fairly tall himself. Michael casually walked over to his bed, grabbed a brand new, unopened bottle of body wash, and tossed it toward Eric. Gently. Eric caught it, wide-eyed. Don't think I'm being kind or anything. Michael muttered, sitting back down and scrolling through his phone like he didn't care. I just don't want you roaming around stinky. Eric stared at the bottle in his hands. His heart did that stupid flutter thing again. This was Michael's way of caring. And when Eric instinctively read Michael's thoughts, he nearly choked. Damn, it's the first time he talked to me by myself, and for a damn body wash. Should I buy a body wash company near the school? Eric froze. Did Michael just consider buying an entire company over this? Eric swallowed hard. This guy was completely insane. And yet, Eric's fingers curled around the bottle. He wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the dorm, or something else entirely. Eric was flustered beyond belief. He grabbed the body wash bottle, rushed into the bathroom, and quickly showered, scrubbing himself down with Michael's scent. The smell was manly, strong, fresh, clean. It clung to his skin, making him feel strangely claimed. He stepped out of the bathroom, steam curling around his damp body. His towel hung loosely around his waist, and his hair dripped onto his collarbone as he wiped his face. He wasn't thinking, wasn't noticing, until he felt it before he saw it. A sharp, heated gaze. Eric turned, and froze. Michael was standing at the doorway. Staring. Not just looking, staring. Unblinking. Unmoving. And then, Eric heard it. He's wet, his skin looks so soft, he smells even better, that body wash makes him smell like me. Wow. Perfect way of claiming him. He looks so good, why the fuck is he so pretty? I need to leave. I need to. Michael's hand clenched into a fist. His jaw ticked. His thoughts were a mess. I shouldn't be here, but what if I just... Then he moved. Slow. Dangerous. Stalking closer like a predator. Eric's heart slammed into his ribs. His towel barely covered him. His body still warm from the shower. He instinctively backed up, until his bare back hit the cold wall. Michael kept walking. Eric's breath hitched. His shaky eyes locked onto him, his eyes silently asking what. Michael didn't answer. Just caged him in, hands resting on either side of his head. His breath fanning over Eric's wet skin. I should leave. I should. But he smells so good. So clean. He smells like me, all warm. I want to touch. Just once. Just. His fingers twitched. Then, as if on instinct, his hand reached out. Brushing against Eric's collarbone. Eric squeaked. His entire body jolted. Michael's eyes darkened. Fuck. That was cute. Eric's face went red. He didn't even need to hear Michael's thoughts to know, his breathing was heavier. Eric tried to push past him, but Michael caught his wrist. He's so small. So delicate. How does he not realize what he does to me? He makes me insane, so how can he think I hate him? Damn. Michael exhaled sharply. He leaned down, so close their noses nearly brushed. Eric's knees nearly gave out. Michael's thoughts grew dangerous. If I kissed him now, would he let me? Then, the lights went out. Eric yelped, stumbling in surprise. Michael caught him, and somehow, their faces leaned closer. Too close. Their lips brushed. Soft. Warm. The moment the lights flickered back on, both Eric and Michael froze. Their eyes widened, lips still pressed together. Eric's entire body locked up. Shock. Terror. His face burning crimson red. But Michael was worse. His ears. His neck. Everything was red. His lips trembled. His brain malfunctioned. As if he couldn't believe it. As if he couldn't process that something he always dreamed of actually happened. He stared down, his thoughts spiraling. Eric swallowed. Was he mad? Eric didn't know what Michael was thinking. Until suddenly, Michael grabbed his arm. Firm, fierce, but gentle, like he had just made a deep decision. He looked up, met Eric's stunned eyes. And before Eric could react, Michael leaned in again, and kissed him, properly. Soft, sensual. Michael's fingers trailing over his skin. Eric should have been mad. Or disgusted. Or confused. But, no. He felt good. Giddy. Shy. His heart was pounding. When Michael finally pulled away, he took a deep, shaky breath. His eyes locked onto Eric's, and without thinking, he blurted out, "I want to do that more. So, go out with me." Eric may not hear, but he did read his lips. Je could feel his voice was firm. Certain. Like an order. His expression was all like giving in blank order. His ego trying to keep him looking cool, but his mind. "I'm so fed up controlling this. I'm done hiding it. I can't do it anymore. Please date me. I love you so damn much, for years, till now, this all feels like a damn dream. Please date me, no, marry me, okay fine, let's date first before I die out of happiness. God, this must make you confused or even scared, but it's true, I love you." His thoughts were a mess. Eric stood there, speechless, staring at him. Michael's heart dropped. He's too silent, not reacting. Of course, why would he? He hates me. He knows I hate him. This must sound like a joke to him. He must think this is some way for me to bully him. There's no way he'd accept it. Or like me back. I should back away. Act like nothing happened. I don't want to force him or scare him more. Michael's fists clenched. He took a step back. But, before he could fully retreat, Eric moved. Fast. His hesitant fingers wrapped around Michael's wrist. Michael froze. His breath hitched. Eric's face was red. His eyes, shy, confused. And then, slowly, slightly, he nodded. Michael's entire brain short-circuited. Shock. Disbelief. His thoughts crashed like a storm. Did he just agree? Eric peeked up at him, flustered as hell. Michael stared. He tried so hard to act cool. To act nonchalant. But his entire body betrayed him. His lips curved up. His ears burned. And before he could stop himself, a small, breathless chuckle left his lips. Holy shit. I actually got the guy, the love of my shitty life. Michael sat back on the couch, legs spread wide, arms draped over the backrest like he owned the place. Casual. Relaxed. Totally chill. At least, that's what he was trying to do. Eric, on the other hand, was sitting on the opposite end of the couch, tense and awkward, still recovering from what happened just a few hours ago. The kiss. The confession. The fact that he actually nodded. Michael cleared his throat and crossed his arms, acting all nonchalant. "Okay, Michael. Be cool. Don't act desperate. Don't act like a lovesick idiot." He tapped his fingers against his knee and casually glanced at Eric. "You hungry?" he asked, his tone bored. Eric blinked, caught off guard. Michael shrugged. "I mean, I don't mind cooking or whatever." Eric's jaw nearly dropped. Cooking. Michael. The same Michael who always made fun of his eating habits. The same Michael who once let him suffer with instant noodles while he ordered himself steak. Now, this Michael was offering to cook. Is he sick? Is he dying? Eric narrowed his eyes, not sure how to react as he couldn't even utter words when Michael suddenly said, acting as if nothing happened. "You know you can communicate in sign language if you know," he said. "'Cause, I know it too well. Been learning it for some scientific researches." Michael added, acting so cool and cold, leaving Eric speechless. Please, talk to me. I haven't learned sign language since few months for nothing." Michael thought while acting expressionless. He scoffed, leaning back even more, trying to look effortlessly cool. "Do you know it or not?" Eric gulped down and slowly nodded. "Good then, let's talk that way." Michael said, "TCH. Don't overthink it. I'm just being a good boyfriend or whatever." Eric nearly choked on air, reading his lips. Boyfriend. Michael was just throwing that word around so easily like they weren't in a complete identity crisis right now. Eric's face burned. He looked down at his lap, playing with the hem of his sleeve. Michael smirked, watching him squirm. "Shit, he's so cute. Wait, no. Stay cool. Stay calm." Michael stretched, pretending to yawn as he reached out, casually patting Eric's head. Eric froze. Michael almost froze too. But he forced himself to stay relaxed, acting like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eric looked up, bewildered. Michael shrugged. "What? Can't I pat my boyfriend's head?" Eric turned so red he thought he might explode. Michael was internally screaming. "I did not mean to say it like that. Why did it come out like that? What the hell is wrong with me?" He immediately stood up, clearing his throat. Anyway. I'll cook. He actually signed those words, making Eric's heart beat. Ever since he had learned sign language, it came no use as no one ever showed any interest to him or ever bothered learning it for him. Who'd want that? But someone now actually doing it for him, also someone whom Eric could never imagined Michael doing it, was more than shocking. It made Eric feel a sense of warmth and happiness. Eric smiled as he saw Michael stormed off to the kitchen before his entire brain malfunctioned. 30 minutes later, Michael stood by the stove, frowning, stirring a pan, checking the recipe on his phone, stirring again, looking way too focused. Eric peeked into the kitchen, blinking in shock. Michael was actually trying. He was chopping vegetables with a serious expression, measuring spices carefully, not just throwing in random stuff like an overconfident idiot. Eric slowly stepped closer. He wanted to ask things but wasn't sure how when Michael noticed, as if he always had his attention on Eric, and signed. I told you if you want to communicate, sign it for me. Eric stared at him, slowly nodding. He hesitated before signing. You actually know how to cook? Michael scoffed and signed. Obviously. What, you thought I was useless? Eric gave him a look. Michael clicked his tongue and signed, TCH. I only cooked for myself. But now, I guess I have to feed my boyfriend too. Eric swore his soul left his body. His face erupted in flames. Michael noticed, smirked, internally high-fived himself. Nailed it. Eric quickly turned away, too embarrassed to respond. But as he hid his face, he couldn't ignore the warmth in his chest. Michael was acting like Michael, but also different, softer, nicer, still annoying, still smug, still an idiot. But now that Eric knew what he was thinking, it felt different. Michael set the plates down, sliding one toward Eric. Eric hesitated before taking a bite. His eyes widened. This is really good. He quickly signed. Michael smirked. Obviously. Eric glanced up at him. Michael was looking away, poking at his own food, pretending like this was no big deal. But Eric could see it. The tips of Michael's ears were red. Eric bit his lip, hiding a smile. Michael may have been acting cool, but he was totally not cool. And Eric kind of liked that. No, he absolutely loved it. Things had changed a lot. Since that day, their relationship settled into a secret rhythm, hidden from the world but deeply felt between them. Michael remained his usual cold and nonchalant self, yet his actions spoke volumes. He treated Eric so gently, always attentive, always caring. He rarely spoke, but whenever he did, his voice was calm, slow, steady. More often than not, he simply signed to Eric, small gestures that made Eric's heart race. Michael started sitting beside him in class, helping him with notes, explaining things in sign language in a way that was so focused and considerate that it made Eric flustered. No one had ever noticed him this much before. No one had ever made him feel this wanted. At first, Eric thought it was all too fast. That maybe it wouldn't last. Yet, 3 months passed. Michael was insanely in love. He pampered Eric way too much. Always pulling him close, pressing kisses against his hair, his cheek, his lips, whenever he got the chance. But Michael's love wasn't just sweet, it was also possessive. Too much. He was always glaring at anyone who so much as breathed near Eric, always ready to throw hands if anyone dared to look at him wrong. And Eric. He was completely flustered every time he read Michael's thoughts. Of course, people began to notice them and wonder how they suddenly went so close. But Michael, he never cared what other thinks. He was too busy always thinking about Eric. Sometimes, Michael was too romantic, cringy, even. Other times, he was terrifying, his thoughts full of pure rage toward anyone who tried to wrong Eric. Eric sometimes wondered, how long would this ability last? But thanks to it, his life had changed in the most beautiful way. One day, Eric decided to visit his mother after a long time. Michael, of course, wanted to come. Eric refused and signed. You don't need to. I'll be fine. Michael didn't argue, but later, Eric found out that Michael had booked him an expensive, secure cab just to make sure he got there safely. Eric sighed but smiled. That was just how Michael was. When Eric arrived home, he was happy. He spent time with his mother, catching up, feeling the warmth of family. But then, she mentioned something that made him pause. Your stepfather called a few months ago, he wanted money, she admitted. But after that, he disappeared. No one's heard from him since. Eric blinked, then shrugged. He didn't care. That man could stay missing for all he cared. As long as he was far away, Eric was happy. When it was time to leave, Eric stepped outside, and froze. Because standing there, leaning casually against a sleek, black car, was Michael. Looking ridiculously hot. Eric's heart skipped a beat. Michael had always been handsome, but under the streetlights, dressed in all black, with that confident stance, he looked breathtaking. People were staring. Of course, they were. How could they not? Eric quickly walked up to him and signed, "You're here." Michael pulled off his black leather gloves, exhaling slowly before reaching for Eric's hands. "I wanted to pick you up," he said simply. Before Eric could react, Michael gently slipped the gloves onto Eric's hands. "It's cold," Michael murmured, securing them around Eric's fingers. Eric felt his face heat up. He stared down at their hands, then at Michael's expression, so casual, yet so soft. He couldn't help but smile. Michael then opened the car door for him, waiting until Eric was inside before joining him. The moment the doors closed, Michael turned toward him. And suddenly, Eric was pulled into a deep, passionate kiss. Eric barely had time to react before he felt Michael's warmth, his intensity, his unspoken longing. Michael's mind was screaming, "I missed you. You know that, right? You're hearing it, right?" Eric smiled against his lips and kissed him back, his arms wrapping around Michael's neck. Outside, the winter air was freezing. But inside the car, wrapped in Michael's heat and affection, Eric felt like he was inside a warm cocoon. That night, Michael took Eric to his apartment. "It's not that big," he had said. But when Eric stepped inside, he was stunned. It was huge, luxurious, far from what Michael made it sound like. But before he could comment, Michael suddenly hugged him from behind. Eric gasped, feeling Michael's arms tighten around him. Michael buried his face in Eric's neck, inhaling deeply. He pressed soft kisses against Eric's skin. Eric's heart was racing. The warmth of Michael's body, the way his lips traced his neck so tenderly. Eric knew. He could feel it. Michael wanted him. Completely. But, he didn't rush. Didn't push. Didn't force. He simply held Eric, waiting. His mind asking, "Can I?" And Eric, feeling safe, cherished, loved, made his decision. That night, he gave himself to Michael completely. And Michael worshipped him. Gentle, yet possessive. Tender, yet intense. A night of unspoken love and desire. A night Eric would never forget. When it was over, Eric lay exhausted, completely spent in Michael's arms. Michael, however, was still awake. His lips curled into a soft, secret smile. A smile that only appeared when Eric wasn't looking. Carefully, Michael cleaned him up, making sure Eric was warm and comfortable before tucking him into the covers. Then, he just watched him. His fingers gently traced Eric's face, brushing against his soft skin. And for the first time in a long time, Michael let his mind wander. He thought back to the very first time he saw Eric. On the bus. It was nighttime. Eric sat by the window, calm and quiet, staring at the night sky with a soft smile. It wasn't anything big, but it was enough. Enough for Michael to get completely hooked. Back then, he thought he'd never see Eric again. Until he found out they were in the same university. And suddenly, a university he had zero interest in became the only place he wanted to be. So he applied, got accepted, and even pulled some strings to be in the same dorm. And now, Eric Wilson was his. Michael leaned down, pressing a final, lingering kiss against Eric's forehead. Then, with a soft sigh, he whispered, "Mine." His thoughts didn't stop there, as he thought. Eric was everything to Michael. Gorgeous, breathtaking, the kind of person Michael just wanted to hold forever, showering with love so much that it almost became too overwhelming for him. Eric's beauty shone through no matter what he did. Whether he was quiet or speaking in his own way, his charm captivated Michael more with each passing day. Michael was deeply, hopelessly in love. It didn't matter that Eric was mute or deaf, none of that mattered to Michael. He just wanted him close. But that wasn't always possible. One day, while passing through the university campus, Michael overheard a group of guys talking. One of them was bad-mouthing Eric, calling him poor, deaf, and mute. The anger inside Michael exploded. His emotions overwhelmed him as he beat the guy senseless, letting his rage take control. The word spread fast. Michael became known as the wildest, scariest bad boy on campus. People feared him, and Michael didn't care, until he learned that the one person he never wanted to fear him, Eric, was terrified of him. That knowledge crushed Michael. He kept his distance, thinking he was better off being invisible in Eric's life than scaring him away completely. But even from a distance, he couldn't stop watching Eric, falling deeper into obsession. His love for Eric became something dark, something all-consuming. It wasn't long before Michael started digging into Eric's past. What he discovered broke him. Eric's father had been abusive, something Michael could never forgive. In his own twisted way, Michael took care of the problem. He had an old garage that served as a place where people like Eric's father could understand the consequences of their actions. Michael made sure that Eric's father would never hurt him again, letting him slowly vanish without a trace. No one cared enough to search for him. And Michael, he took care of Eric in the only way he knew how, silently, from the shadows. When Eric wanted a part-time job, Michael cleared out every cafe nearby so Eric could work there, making sure he was paid well and treated fairly. He arranged for Eric's professors to speak slowly, ensuring he could write notes in class without trouble. No one, absolutely no one, was allowed to hurt Eric. If they tried, Michael would show them hell. But there was something Eric never knew, something he could no longer read: Michael's thoughts. After that passionate night together, when their bodies became entwined and everything about their relationship changed, Eric's ability to read minds disappeared. The next morning, Eric woke up confused. His mind no longer buzzed with Michael's thoughts. He was confused as he stared at Michael. "Good morning," Michael murmured, his voice unusually soft. Eric blinked, surprised by how quiet his mind was. No intrusive thoughts, no overwhelming emotions rushing into his head. Just silence. His ability, his strange, unnatural ability to read minds, was gone. He gasped slightly, looking at Michael with wide eyes. His lips parted, but no words came out. His hands instinctively moved to sign, but Michael caught them gently, threading their fingers together. Michael frowned slightly, his dark eyes scanning Eric's face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice still low, filled with concern. Eric hesitated, then shook his head. He couldn't hear Michael's thoughts anymore. But instead of fear, relief flooded him. For the first time, Eric didn't need to hear Michael's thoughts to understand him. Everything was written so clearly on his face: the way he held him, the way his fingers traced gentle circles on the back of his hand, the way his lips brushed against his knuckles as if he was worshipping him. A small smile tugged at Eric's lips. He reached out, cupping Michael's cheek, his thumb grazing over the faint stubble growing there. "I don't need it anymore," he signed with his free hand. "I can see it now. Everything." Michael stayed still, smiling, his breath catching. Of course he knew. Yeah, Eric had told him about the mind-reading ability not long ago, but that didn't change anything. Michael's thoughts remained the same, saying his ego couldn't let him say it out loud, so then his mind saying them and letting Eric know it all was better. That made Eric just disbelief and laugh. He thought Michael would be mad or hesitant, but no, he was just himself like always. "Guess I stole your ability away," Michael whispered, then, ever so slowly, his lips curled into a rare, breathtaking smile. A genuine one. One Eric had never seen before. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Instead, he pulled Eric into his arms, wrapping him in warmth, in safety, in love. And for the first time in his life, Eric truly felt like he belonged.